Welcome to Where's the Any Key, the podcast where we talk shop about topics, tips, and trends for the modern IT admin. I'm your host, Ryan Bacon, the IT support manager at JumpCloud. Joining me today is Kyle McKenna. He is the manager of enterprise technology at Cars.com. How's it going, Kyle?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for coming on. To start off, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I've been overseeing IT at Cars.com now for about 2.5 years. But really, that's kind of split into a couple of sections. There's another company that Cars.com acquired back in 2018 called Dealer Inspire. And when I was first hired in the organization, I started at Dealer Inspire as their first ever IT person, walking into 600 users, a little blind, which I know we're going to talk about during our episode today. But after COVID or during COVID, we decided to kind of combine forces with, me being solo and Cars.com having some personnel as well. So I kind of took the reins back last November, but before Cars.com and Dealer Inspire, straight out of college, I got sucked into Apple retail, and I worked in Apple retail for about 4 years before I moved on to working at a very large post-production house in Chicago that has locations in a few cities across the United States and outside of the United States. And I did some IT support for them and also some things on TV commercial sets, which was pretty fun. But then I kind of discovered Dealer Inspire in 2019 after, my wife and I decided to stop being cool living in the city of Chicago and wanted to settle down in the suburbs kind of people.
Yeah, I definitely get that. My wife and I a while back were looking at moving to California, to the Bay Area. And we thought gave it serious thought. And then we're like, no, we're good with where we are in Colorado.
Yeah, so, now with the pandemic in full swing, pretty much still, depending on the organization you're working for, that may not be an issue for people down the road of, well, I'm moving 30 miles west. I guess I'm going to have to change jobs. And now that's, for the most part, depending on the organization you're working for, not that big of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we moved when I started at JumpCloud I lived about, it was about an hour and a half drive away from the office. So I moved to kind of like split the difference because my wife was still working in the town where we used to live. But now, I still will have to go into the office every once in a while, but we've shifted. So now we're actually moving back to the town that we moved from. And so, a periodic, hour and a half commute's not too bad, but, because I'm not going to have to do it every day.
Right.
But I mean, we're getting sidetracked from the very beginning, which is fine. But I would like to get on to our, what we're going to mainly talk about, because I think it's really neat. So, but as you mentioned, as you alluded to, what we're going to at least start talking about is building an IT department from the ground up. You did that at Dealer Inspire. I did this at JumpCloud. It's one of the big reasons why I came to JumpCloud was for that opportunity, and it is. I want to get your take on it first before I overtake things and start rambling on. But what were your thoughts like going into the whole process, and then like how your plans changed from the start to like short term to even to now? What was the progression of your plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started at Dealer Inspire, I didn't really have much experience with like ticketing systems and things like that. My previous job at the post house was kind of just like an email based thing, or people would just, walk into our engineering room and be like, hey, this doesn't work, can you fix it, kind of a thing. And we were also only supporting about 150 users at that time, versus now we oversee about 1,600 people. So big difference there as well. But probably within the first 3 to 4 months of me using Slack to like set reminders to follow up with people on issues, I quickly determined that I needed a ticketing system. And Dealer Inspire and Cars are both G Suite and Slack organizations. And so I noticed that Slack was kind of like extremely heavily used, like probably 80 to 90% of our internal communications is done through Slack. And I found that people were sending me Slack DMs for their tech issues. So I decided, instead of making it harder on my end users to put in a ticket, I decided to make it easier on them by going to them, if that makes sense. And I started to use a Slack-based ticketing system back, like, I think it was officially like 6 months after I started there, where somebody would send me a direct message and I would mark it with a little emoji and it would just turn it automatically into a ticket, and I could start the thread from a different channel there and kind of track all of my issues. So that was kind of how it started. And how it's going, if you will, is when we combined into Cars and to be one team, one dream thing. It was extremely important for us to actually have all that ticket data in a larger ticketing system that was more auditable. So now we still use that Slack-based ticketing software, and that syncs directly into Jira. So now it makes it really easy for us to look up previous tickets, and people can, either send an email or post in a Slack channel, and it'll automatically get turned into a ticket, and also recommend some like self-service answers as well. And if they can't figure out it, it'll automatically get turned into a ticket. So that was kind of like where we started, but we're also still there, but we're a little bit more like corporate and buttoned up from where we started, if that makes sense. But the ticketing software was an essential like first step into getting organized, because if you can't track those conversations with people, it is so easy to forget about things. And then either, people go days or weeks without being able to use their work computer, or they get frustrated because nobody's replied to them in several days. So getting that ticketing system to have a good customer support, internal employee support system is very vital, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. That was actually one of the first things also that I worked on coming to Jump Club. When they came on, one of my mandates from the company was to, work on streamlining the onboarding process. But the places that I've worked before, I always used ticketing systems, and they didn't have one in place at Jump Club, or they had set one up and like somebody set one up and like played around with it, and there were like 20 test messages on it, and then that was it. It was just like mothballed. But even to do your day-to-day, like you said, without that, you get lost so easily. And I really get what you mean by going to where they are, because we use the same ticketing platform. That is, we both use Halp, and we switched that for the same reason, because we're a very Slack heavy company. So we get all these messages and, these DMs and stuff. And what we were doing is, we still wanted it to be easy on the person with our old ticketing system. So I would be like transcribing Slack messages into our old ticketing system. And then finally I discovered that ticketing system could do like webhooks into Slack so people could do requests, and we started like training people, and it was really clunky. And then I saw what Halp was doing at that time. I'm like, oh, let's do this. And so we switched, and now it's great when I get that DM and it's like somebody's like, oh, do I need to put in a ticket for this? Or do they ask me a question like, oh, I need to do this, do I need to put in a ticket for this? And I go, it's like 2 button clicks, and I'm like, ticket's already created, you're good to go. And it's, having that level of service is amazing. And and it makes buy-in easier, because when you're setting up these processes, getting one of the hardest parts, especially with a ticketing system, is to get people to actually use it. And I thought this was a brilliant way to kind of work around that.
Yep. No, absolutely. So yeah, getting a ticketing system was definitely a top priority for me when I came in, and became pretty instantly overwhelmed when word had spread that the company finally had an IT person.
Oh, I bet. You are a sole person for supporting 600 people.
Yep.
Like, were they all like, was it like a mix? Were they all like people using computers and you actually had to get all of them? Or were like some like production, like working on a shop floor or something like that, where it was very light touch? Because that is, oh man, even half that is a massive lift for one person.
Yeah, it was just me for a little over a year before I could finally get the budget to hire somebody else and make my case to add more people. And by that point, we probably had 700 employees. Dealer Inspire has this awesome problem that we're growing like wildfire, which kind of leads me to my next category of essentials for getting an IT department up and running, is trying to figure out how you want to manage your devices, which at the time when I came in, all of these computers were Macs. About half of the organization worked in our Naperville office, and the other half were just hired on as full-time remote employees. Which was great that we were already kind of ahead of the curve there. But devices were not managed, and we didn't have like an inventory system or anything like that. So I was kind of flying blind for quite some time. Small plug for Jump Cloud, but we finished getting onboarded with you guys. We were done binding all the machines and doing the account takeover process back in, I want to say it was late February, early March of this year. And we started that process back in November, I want to say 2020, which was challenging to do that in a remote environment. But now that everything is managed, like, it's a game changer to be able to, like, somebody puts in a ticket and says something's not working, and to be able to take a quick peek and see that either A, their computer is 6 years old and they should probably get a new one, or B, their uptime on their computer is 213 days and maybe they should try rebooting it, kind of a thing. I know that's like the age-old joke of, did you turn it off and turn it on again? But the reality is that does fix a ton of issues.
It does, especially, when they have that, when they have like a massive uptime counter, and being able to see that, where somebody is like, oh, I did just reboot it, when, I'm willing to give them give the benefit of the doubt that maybe they logged out and logged back in and thought that was rebooting. I won't put my cynical hat on right at this very moment, at least.
Yeah.
But it's good to be able to have that information, have that data, and then be able to act on it and help you to do that. And also another kind of, it's in a way, it's also a double-edged sword, because once you implement something like that and you have that visibility, then you're like, oh man, there's all this other work that we need to do now to get that done. And that kind of leads into another thing that you mentioned, and that's an asset management system. I will say that, for everybody out there who's like, an Excel spreadsheet will work for me, you try like a dedicated asset management system. They don't have to be that expensive. I've used free ones, I've used paid ones, I've used Excel, I've used spreadsheets, but like having something where you can set up, automation, where you can set up, like the one that we use, it'll actually send us alerts. We put in our warranty information in our item, so we get alerts like 30 days out when a system's warranty is about to expire. So stuff like that, so you can be prepared. And when accounting comes to you because they're undergoing audit and they need to be like, hey, especially in a distributed company, like, how many assets do we have in each state? Being able to answer those questions, that's stuff that I didn't necessarily think of right off the bat when I started, because a lot of when I started building out the department, because at least for me, I was like, it's such a big task and there's so much to do that I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus on these things right now. I'm going to focus on, the onboarding process and the ticketing system and pretty much advertising myself, letting people know that I'm there to support and everything like that. That like, okay, we're using an Excel spreadsheet for assets right now. That will have to change later. That's, if it's working for now, we'll stick with it for now, but you start building that list.
Right.
And I'm curious to hear what your, how you handled that.
Well, that's the thing, is since we didn't have anything from the get-go, and now we have 600, 700, 800 devices that were never like barcoded in the first place. That's something that we're technically like using JumpCloud as our asset management, but I know we need to get something additional on top of it that we can put in warranty information and know like when people are eligible for an upgrade and things like that. And that's an ongoing problem that we currently face. Is we are more of a reactive computer upgrades rather than proactive. And I prefer to be proactive when it comes to stuff like that. But we just, due to the situation I walked into, we don't have the infrastructure set up. So that is something that we are going to figure out long term. But right now it's like somebody puts in a ticket and is like, I'm having trouble with my computer and it's really slow. And we look at their device in JumpCloud and it says their machine has 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's like, whoa, okay, time for you to get a new computer. Thanks for putting up with this thing for 5 years. We appreciate you, kind of a thing.
Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not judging you, because when it comes to system upgrades, we're also reactive. Even with this information, we have, especially when it comes to developers, they have their development environment set up like exactly how they want it. So they're actually hesitant to upgrade. I don't know how many times somebody's been having a problem with their system, like keys falling off of their keyboard and stuff like that. And we're like, hey, your system's out of warranty. We can get you, a brand new upgraded system. And they're like, I could let me try, see if I could tolerate it for another 2 months
Yeah.
before you do anything. Because like even if we, they went into like took it, depending on the model, the model they have, if it's out of Apple Care and it doesn't fall into that keyboard replacement program that they had, even for broken keys, it's usually not worth paying to replace that on a really old system. But yeah, we've had people, we've had developers who were like, well, can you just like upgrade my system other than replace it? But where those alerts come in handy is really just so it's on our radar. So if like this person's starts having issues, then we could be like, oh, we kind of anticipate it. But yeah, we're still reactive on that, because this is another part with doing IT in a growing company is that like the keeping a handle on inventory for new systems has become super challenging, with chip shortages, just demands on certain things. And, we have a specific configuration for our MacBook, for some of our MacBooks that, it's not an off the shelf thing. So when we order it from Apple, it has to go and they have to get built. So we can have a 3+ week turnaround time on these things, and it could be all that we can do just to keep up with new hires. And it's, so that is a challenge. We can't always be like, well, sometimes we've been in spots where we have to be like, well, your system is working. It's annoying. We'll get you on the list for the next shipment that comes in. But it's more important that, somebody who's starting has a computer that they can actually work on.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hear you about the developers being hesitant to upgrade their machines. I have the same situations at our organization. I feel like the more things they have stored on the local drive and the less like cloud-based, like SaaS applications of a user, the more hesitant they are to upgrade. I mean, we've had people with like pillowed batteries that are like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, no, that thing's going to explode.
No, it's not.
We need to get you a new computer.
Yeah, it'll not be fine when the battery explodes and catches your house on fire. So that brings up another thing that I'd like to talk about, and that's policies. How do you go? I mean, because it's not just ticketing systems and managing inventory. It's you have to put policies and practices in place to have an effective IT team. So how did you go about determining what policies you needed to put in place? And also, how did you get buy-in for those policies?
We're fortunate enough to have a great security team at cars.com. I realize not all organizations have their own security team. So we're very fortunate to have them. So we worked with them when we were onboarded with Jump Cloud or onboarding with Jump Cloud. And we looked at all the policies Jump Cloud had to offer to push to Macs and Windows devices. And we put them all on the spreadsheet, and we had a couple of meetings about it, and we all just roundtabled. And, some things we went back and forth on for a couple of meetings, and other things were like everybody just instantly agreed. And I mean, to get buy-in for end users, that was a tough one because a lot of the Dealer Inspire employees having full freedom and access on their computer to I don't want to say like Big Brother locking it down, but essentially putting some policies on there that would do things like block iCloud Drive, for example, or force your computer to go to screensaver after 15 minutes, kind of a thing. That was something that when I was getting the organization in like up and running with Jump Cloud, I put for about a week and a half straight, I ran these Zoom webinars to get people to install it. And I said, these are mandatory webinars. You need to attend it. I was playing like music that had the lyrics jump in it to get people like excited to install software on their computer that they had no idea what it was going to do. But then I also, beforehand, after, you know, doing all my testing on my test devices and stuff, I put together a document to outline like things that you might see change on your computer after installing Jump Cloud. And so that was a really quick and easy Google Doc to send people who attended the webinar, and then those that, you know, didn't read it after they attended and put in a ticket after that said like, where did my files go from iCloud? Well, here's this document. Here they are. They're in an archive folder. Don't worry. So that was kind of like roundtabling with our security team to all agree on policies that we want to push to all of our Macs and our PCs. And then also getting buy-in from end users of putting this document together and then like kind of putting the why behind this software is needing to be installed on the computers. And I feel like overall, you know, getting about 800 or so, 800 to 1,000 Macs for people to install it themselves went pretty well, all things considered.
That's impressive. And I will have to say that you're a much nicer person than I am, because our screen lockout policy is 5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's been some people that's really rubbed the wrong way. They're like, I'm in my house, blah, blah, blah. I don't need my computer to go to screensaver. And then it's like, you always throw the example, okay, well, what happens if you're on an airplane or you're at a Starbucks or you are in some other public location? And they go, oh yeah, okay, sure.
Oh, and also not only that, but it's a matter of, it's not just you. We're you know, we have to find a policy that we can apply company wide, because if it's going to be granular down that we're making exceptions for individual people at individual times, that's not scalable. It's not, you can't maintain that. So it's like we have to find one policy for everyone, or at least like maybe, you know, at best like a policy per department or something like that. And not everybody is in the same environment. You know, some people have roommates. Some people, you know, work from a coffee shop most of the time because it has better internet than their home internet. You know, all of that stuff. And I've found that everybody that's asked, you know, about our 5-minute our 5-minute screen lock policy that I've explained that way, they're, you know, I've gotten very little, if any, pushback after that explanation. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then I also my personal example that I use is that I have cats. So even at my home, if I walk away from my computer and my cats start sending weird Slack messages because they're walking on my keyboard, I don't want to have to explain that.
Or go post in like the Slack all company channel at here XYZ123.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, doing for any big changes, and when you're building an IT team, there are going to be big changes, especially if you're in a company where people have been there for years, or in the case of Jump Cloud, where it's been, you know, that small, scrappy startup that's starting to grow and mature and enter that growth phase, where, you know, people are used to, you know, it being kind of like the Wild West of being able to do whatever they need to do. You can, you know, getting stuff in place and like securing it down and formalizing things. I mean, stuff that you have to do in order to, well, frankly, not just run your department, but help run the company properly. That can be a hard sell, but I found that as long as you're like you tell people, you're transparent, give them plenty of education, communication, heads up, exactly what you were describing. That people tend to be a lot more acceptable of that. Mm-hmm. And my advice for people out there is stay away from just do it because I said so. That never works.
Yeah, I try to be kind of like it's a little bit harder in a full remote environment, but back when we were in office, I try to be kind of like the mayor of the company, like out in the office, shaking hands, kissing babies, kind of a thing, and making my presence known. Rather than kind of like the stereotypical like IT guy is like, sitting in a dark basement with no windows and is resetting passwords all day and not really talking to anybody. I try to be the opposite of that. And I try to be out and about so people know who I am and hopefully start to like who I am. And from there, when it comes time for me to ask them to do something, they have a name, like a face to the request, and they'll hopefully remember me and want to help me out, if that makes sense. Obviously, our job is to help them out all the time, but it's if you're kind of out in the general public, I guess that's the way I put it. Then and you get to know people, then they'll be there for you when you need them, if that makes sense.
That does, and I will say that's sometimes building an IT department from the ground up is not even necessarily going into some place that doesn't have an IT department, because the place that I worked before Jump Cloud, it was a small nonprofit. They've had it's a single person IT shop, and they've and I was going in there to fill a vacancy, and the person before me was that stereotypical IT person that was, I know more than you, like every request was a bother, everything like that. So the people who have been there had that, had that experience of, oh, we don't want to take anything to this person. We don't want to, we'll deal with it. We'll find a workaround, anything like that, so we don't have to bother IT.
Right.
And so when I started there, I spent a lot of time walking around talking to people. I found out about so many problems that were happening that it's like, oh, this printer's not working. Okay, well, when did the problem start happening? 3 months ago. and it took me a long time to get to the point for people to trust me, but that was a key part in ending up being successful there, so that people would start making requests, letting me know when there are problems. So it was almost like building a department from the ground up. Just with a little bit of boost with predetermined, there was a groundwork already there somewhat, but there was I had to rehabilitate it pretty much.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the original question of like, how do you build an IT department from the ground up? When you get the budget to hire more people, I tend to focus on people with good personalities. It is a lot easier to teach somebody technical skills than it is to teach them how to have a good personality, if that makes sense. You can teach most people technical skills, but it's especially in a remote environment with like lack of the ability to like coach somebody for like how to talk to somebody. So that was something that I kind of prioritized when it came to building my team, is making sure that people that I was building around me were people that I'd feel comfortable, sending over to my grandma's house to help her switch the HDMI input, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's, when I'm looking at growing the team, soft skills is number one. Because they have to get along with everybody else on the team, and they have to get along with, with our, our customers, the people we serve, the fellow, our coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that is hard to teach. It really is. And to kind of shift direction here along the lines but still stay along the lines of growing the team. When the question arises, when do you grow your team? What do you use? And it's a hard question because every environment is different. I mean, I think of what you're doing at supporting 600 people by yourself, and I think I'm like, how do you not have a team of at least like 3 or 4 people doing that? And you hear the stories of the one person shop supporting 1,000 people, and that I'm like, are you just like going home and collapsing in bed every night to get 3 hours of sleep so you can wake up and go right back to work? And so that's one way to look at it, is do you go off of ratios, off of that user to technician ratio? Because there's tons of information out there on it. I know places, there have been a few studies that I've seen that have looked at that, like one from Gartner Research and one from Robert Half. Even though I will say, Robert Half, they're a staffing agency, so you may want to keep that in mind. But they actually both agreed that the ideal user to technician ratio in a homogeneous environment is I think it was like 1 to 80. I'm like,
oh wow,
like
okay,
that's a bit too idealistic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, more power to you if you can get that. But I mean, so having that kind of data is what I've used. I mean, even though I don't think we need to have that low of a ratio here, I've gone, like, when I've gone to present to our finance team or a people team, being like, we need to get more IT people on, I can say, this is what these professional organizations who do this stuff who do this stuff all the time, this is what they say, this is what they suggest. I'm asking for 1 to 100, something like that. Aren't I a more reasonable person? but I mean, aside from that, in reality, in all seriousness, you need to be able to show data. Like, what are your goals? Like, here we have pretty much 2 different pools of tasks that we do. We do support, and our customer, our employee support, and then we have our project works, system improvement, process improvement, everything like that. And the indicator for me when we need to start the ball rolling on growing the team is when more and more of when we don't have the time to do that long-term, process improvement and stuff like that, when we're spending the majority of our time doing support work, then we need more help.
Right.
Or, so, and also, we're going to be getting to this, I would imagine we're going to be getting to this point soon, where not only that, where people are asking for IT resources, for that system improvement and stuff like that. If we can't keep up with those requests, then we're going to also have to hire more staff. And this is where those ticketing systems and those project management systems really will come into play, because then you could have this data and say, this is our volume, this is how much it's grown, this is this is how this growth has affected our response time and our resolution time and everything like that. So you can make that argument to being like, hey, if you want us to maintain a reasonable level of service and support, we need more people.
Yeah, exactly. But that also kind of goes back to hiring the right people as well, because not every IT person is created equal, if that makes sense.
It does, and it is very important. I've had several people come, make the comment to me over the past year since we've been growing our team, that it's like, we're surprised that you do as much as you do with a team as small as you have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we have the right people, we have the right tools, we have the right processes, and that is super important. So speaking of finding the right people and growing the team and stuff like that, an important part of an IT team is supporting both the onboarding and offboarding process for a company. And as I mentioned before, that was one of the first things I was tasked with when I started at JumpCloud. So what are your thoughts on building those processes and maintaining them and adapting them, because it will change as the company grows?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to choosing the right MDM solution as well. I'm a little biased because we are using JumpCloud right now and we are liking them for the most part. But we utilize, at least for our Macs, which our Macs take up over 2/3 of all 1,600 computers. So that's kind of our priority. But we utilize Apple Business Manager with our Macs. So for those of you not familiar, you work with Apple and their vendor, whether that's like you buy directly through Apple or CDW, which I buy through both, whichever one can get them to me faster, with the old chip shortage issues. And when you buy those computers and they ship to you, they become essentially married to your account. So as soon as those computers turn on and connect to the internet, which is like literally the first thing you do when you turn on a Mac after you pick the language, you get greeted with a screen that says like, "Welcome to Cars." So getting those computers set up with MDM and having them auto install your MDM client upon first internet connection is pretty key. That helps our team speed things up. I know JumpCloud has some zero-touch solutions in place, but they're not quite there for us yet, which I'll segue that in a little bit. But we like to, when we turn on those computers and we set up those accounts, I have a script in place that it installs an admin account, it installs Zoom, Chrome, Slack, and it also installs our Endpoint Security protection software as well. So, and then it rearranges all the fluff on the old Apple computer dock. It removes like 90% of the apps. So that way, when the end user, the new hire gets their computer, they open it up and, they're provided a password. And they just they log right into it and they have the essentials already on the computer waiting for them. And then kind of the inverse of that for offboarding, having an MDM, especially in a remote environment, is super crucial. I won't provide any numbers, but before we had JumpCloud on our Macs, the return rate of laptops from separated employees was not great, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But with JumpCloud and most other MDMs, on the admin side of things, you have the ability to turn those things into a brick. And with that, in the combination of Apple Business Manager, even if those people figured out how to like erase the computer, they're still going to come back and get remarried to the organization through Apple Business Manager. So it's kind of like, oh, you thought you were clever, and then you connect to Wi-Fi and it just gets you right back to where you started. So having that, like, we have like internal documentation on like exactly what needs to happen, like at 5 p.m. Central Time on someone's last day, for offboards. And then we have the same thing for onboarding of like, here's the position that they're in. Do they qualify for a paid Zoom license? Do they qualify for this software? Set them up ahead of time so that way things go smoothly for them, during their first week, kind of a thing. Log into Slack for them so they don't have to figure out that annoying dance. So
Yeah, exactly. It's you're talking about how things changed when you got your MDM and you're using Jump Cloud as an MDM. So I've been the MDM feature of Jump Cloud has been here for a bit over a year now, and which means I spent about 2 years at Jump Cloud without it, and part of that time was having internal discussions with engineering. I'm like, because they're like, what kind of things would you like to see? And I'm like, can we get an MDM? I mean, I'm not saying the MDM was my idea, or by a long shot. A lot of customers requested that, and frankly, the change to Big Sur mandated it. That was the only way we could go forward.
Oh yeah.
So like for a lot, like I was like looking at MDMs, and like I tested some, but I'm like I really wanted to hold out because like, especially after a certain point, I knew it was coming,
right?
And like we need this, but I know that when it comes out, we're going to want to use our own product. So it was once I had that, it was a game changer. And so definitely for those of you out there who don't have an MDM, get one.
Absolutely.
And with both onboarding and offboarding, even if you have it automated, it's good to have a checklist, especially with offboarding, because that is critical. If you're going through any kind of like security audits, SOC 2 type 2, anything like that, having documentation like, yes, this person left, this was who did their process, and at this time and everything like that. Like, you have to do that. Even like I said, even if it's automated, you need to be able to double check, because sometimes automation fails or has hiccups. There could be latency on your network, and that causes an API call to fail, or something like that. So that is.
And having SSO to like prevent access and lock it down really quick is super great to have. But depending on the application type, you still may need to log into the back end on the admin side and still physically delete that account, or delete and transfer their data to like their manager or something like that. So SSO is also pretty vital, but there's still a lot of manual labor involved with removing that employee's stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I'm a very strong proponent of automation. So that's when you're looking at tools, it's when you're looking at software solutions, SaaS, stuff like that, it's always good to see, like, do they support like SCIM for the SSO, which will auto deprovision people, or at the very least, do they provide their customers like API access? Do they have a REST API where you can write stuff, so that you can write that script in there where it will go out there and it will remove that account, do that cleanup automatically. So that's a big part of the list of things that I look for in solutions, that frankly, until I really dove into like really in-depth scalable onboarding and offboarding, that I didn't consider. So like when I started at Jump Cloud and doing these processes, it was a good 8 to 10 months before I even started looking at how we could automate it.
Right.
So I'd say the earlier the better that you get it in, because it's a lot more difficult when it's easier to do when you have 100 people than when you have 1,200 people.
Exactly.
So going along with another like important part of IT responsibilities when it comes to decisions that you're going to have to make when you're building out your team and building your policies and stuff is endpoint protection. Okay, so going back to policies and determining how you want your interactions, how you want people to interact with their systems and everything like that. A big thing that you have to think about is how are you going, what level of access are you going to give people onto their systems, and especially in a situation like where you were, where you said that like pretty much everybody had full access, full run of their systems, and you had to tighten that down. Could you talk to me about like the thought that went into that and how you handled it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, even from the start, I'm a big proponent of letting users be admins on their own machines. But the caveat there is that you need to have good endpoint security in place on the computers for when that situation arises that, some employee thinks they're downloading some like version of Zoom or Slack or something, Firefox, what have you. They're actually downloading Firefox, but they're also accidentally installed a bunch of malware that came along with it. That way your endpoint security software will kind of pick that up and send the alerts to the appropriate people that, hey, this computer has malware on it, or at least we think it has malware on it. But I know, kind of going back to your original question about letting users be admins on their own machines, I felt like we'd be doing a disservice to people if they've been used to things for so long. And it's one thing to make their screensavers start after 15 minutes, but it's another thing to completely remove admin from their computers if they had been using it, one way for so long. Luckily, Jump Cloud does allow us to toggle users to be admins and back to a normal, like, standard user. So you could make an argument to not allow people to be admins on their computers, and when they need to be admins, you can make sure that they need it for a good reason and temporarily upgrade them to be an admin and then flip them back. But since we utilized Jump Cloud to deploy our endpoint protection software, and that's on every computer in our organization, we feel like that's sufficient and lightweight endpoint protection software that kind of works behind the scenes to scan those computers for us, would alert us if people, did something malicious on their own machine that they didn't intend to do, and then we can take the appropriate actions afterwards.
Yeah, see, this is why I like having conversations, about even having, talking about the same topic to multiple people, because we've had that episode previous where we talked about admin privileges, and for me, I try to do follow the practice of least privilege as much as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. But honestly, you bring up a very good point, and it's that point being, it's about your environment. It's about your employee base. It's all the people you're supporting. I mean, and adapting to that, especially if you're coming into a well-established organization that has been doing something, for a long time. I mean, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that just because they've been doing it for a long time means it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. But there are things that you can do to to keep people happy, keep people in a familiar work environment, and still mitigate the risks. So mm-hmm. The thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about how you do things is trust but verify. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll give you access to, admin access to download what you need to download to do what you need to do. but just so you know, we'll also know if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
And so that's, you know, it may not work for every environment.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's some people listening right now that their head is exploding and they're like, "What is this dumb idiot thinking?"
But the thing is that I have to give you credit where credit's due. You looked at like what was you know the state before you got there, what people expected, what people would tolerate, and you know, and what did you need to do to allow them to keep doing that in a safe and secure manner.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know, kind of like what we were talking about with the ticketing, you know, you meet them where they are, and you adapt, and that really is the core of building an IT department, is that you need to be adaptable, you need to be flexible. Because if I you know stuck to the ideas that I had in my head when I day one at Jump Cloud, I probably wouldn't be here right now, because I mean I would have caused so many problems because you know it's you know things change, technologies change, you know, sensibilities change, whatever, and you need to be able to change with them. So I think that yeah, you're not going to get the idiot lecture from me at all. I'd say more power to you. So
thanks.
All right, that we talked about a lot. And that's all the time that we have for this episode. Again, my guest is Kyle McKenna. He's the manager of enterprise technology at Cars.com. Kyle, thank you for coming on and talking to me about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. It was a really fun conversation with you.
Thank you for tuning in to Where's the Any Key. If you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe. Again, my name is Ryan Bacon. I lead IT at Jump Cloud, where the team here is building a cloud-based directory platform that provides frictionless, secure access to virtually any IT resource from trusted devices anywhere. You can learn more and even set up a free account at jumpcloud.com.